So, the latest classic era story that I am to watch through is The Keeper of Traken, the penultimate story for the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, with him only doing one story after that, that being Logopolis, his regeneration story. The Fourth Doctor, played once again by Tom Baker, and his companion Adric, played by Matthew Waterhouse, have recently managed to escape from E-Space and are now back in N-Space, which is our reality. They're heading back to Gallifrey when they're suddenly contacted by the Keeper of Traken, the current Keeper of Traken, played by Dennis Carey, who tells the Doctor he is nearing the end of his life and once he dies he will pass on the mantle of Keeper to a successor. Now, at the current time, the successor is due to be a man on Traken named Tremas, played by Anthony Ainley. However, the Keeper senses a growing evil, and so wants the Doctor's help in order to put a stop to it. And he senses the evil could be connected with either Tremas's intended wife Cassia, played by Sheila Ruskin, or his daughter Nyssa, played by Sarah Sutton. Now, Traken is supposedly a place that is so good, so pure, so ethical, so good-hearted, that any evil that arrives on Traken seemingly instantly dies. And as an example for this, they use the example of something called the Melker. The Melker was seemingly a creature that arrived on Gallifrey, not on Gallifrey, on Traken, and it was seemingly turned to stone. It was seemingly rooted there and essentially became a statue that kind of remains there to this day. Now, Cassia kind of worships the statue in that she kind of goes every day, talks to it, comforts it, and ultimately brings it flowers and tries to make it comfortable and the like. But the statue is not entirely as it seems, and it seems something far darker may soon be falling over the land. This was a story that was broadcast in 4 parts from the 31st of January to the 21st of February 1981, and was the 6th story of the 18th season, as well as I mentioned, Tom Baker's penultimate story. And it's also the episode that introduced two actors who were going to have major parts in the wider universe, that being Anthony Ainley and Sarah Sutton's Nyssa. Nyssa, of course, becoming a future companion, joining the Doctor and Adric in the next story, Logopolis, and travelling onwards for quite a bit. Now, I will admit this to me felt like a pretty good story, and I did see what people meant, that if you want to kind of look at it in the best way with Tom Baker's regeneration, the best way to do it is to look at the 3 stories, The Keeper of Traken, Logopolis, and Castrovalva, all in one package. I do see how that could be beneficial. It's not the way I ultimately ended up doing it. I ended up doing it as I watched Logopolis, then later on, a few weeks ago, more like a week ago, watched Castrovalva, and then I recently watched The Keeper of Traken. So I didn't do it in quite the right order. But yeah, I can see why people would suggest watching this as a grouping, and why ultimately the box set for these stories does make sense. Now, before I talk about the next part, I am going to, fair warning, I am going to make a pretty major spoiler about this story. It's one that you probably already know by now, but if you haven't seen the story yet, go off, and I'll be waiting here. You're back? Good. Now, it's of course ultimately revealed to be a plan by the Doctor's arch-nemesis, the Master, played at this point by actor Geoffrey Beevers. Now, after Roger Delgado's unfortunate death, before Roger Delgado died, they felt they were overusing the Master a bit. So they had plans to kind of kill him off, put this character to rest, that's the end of it. However, sadly Delgado died before that could happen. So ultimately those story ideas were scrapped. Now the final appearance of Roger Delgado's Master was in Frontier in Space. And after that, the Master kind of fell silent for a bit. His next appearance was in the story, fourth Doctor story, The Deadly Assassin, where he appears as a badly scarred wreck of a Time Lord, having used up all of his regeneration, so he's now still like a walking husk. And it's played at that time by actor Peter Pratt. Now, Geoffrey Beever's Master continues on that in that he is still kind of decaying, but he wishes to ultimately take the place of the Keeper of Traken in order to gain access to the Source. We have a source of all power on Traken, and one that will ultimately kind of help him rejuvenate himself, but also capture the Doctor to use his knowledge and take over the universe and blah blah blah. You get the idea, basic idea with the Master. And of course, at the end of the story, after the Doctor and Adric have left, the Master ultimately returns and takes over the body of Tremas, with Anthony Ainley then assuming the role as the Master. And for an in-between between since the previous Masters and Anthony Ainley's Master, Geoffrey Beevers, I think, does the job fine. I definitely think he's got the madness down, and he definitely has a sinister edge to him, but I can see why people are a bit hesitant about kind of including him and Peter Pratt as the Master, in that, to be honest, he's only really in it for a few minutes. He appears briefly at the end of part 4, kind of shown to be the mastermind behind everything, and it does feel a little bit like he was an afterthought. Now, I do understand why they did it. In the pamphlet inside the DVD, it says that they wanted to bridge, with Tom Baker soon set to leave the role of the Doctor, they wanted something to bridge the gap between Doctors. They briefly tried getting Romana or Sarah Jane Smith back to kind of help bridge the gap, but neither of them were available, so ultimately they brought back the Master. I can understand why they did it, but then again, it does feel a bit like he was tacked on at the end. But that's just my thought. Although, that being said, towards the end of part 3, I did think they began kind of telegraphing the Master was behind these things. Like, there's a part where the Doctor and Tremas are seemingly confined to Tremas's quarters, where the Doctor turns to him and asks, I don't suppose you've got any master plans or master blueprints for the technology, have you? And I just thought, you're telegraphing this quite hard. I mean, I don't know how it was in 1981, but yeah, it just kind of felt like we're trying to do this masterfully. It's just like, yeah, you're definitely trying to push this, aren't you? At least that's just what I thought. But then, as I said, this is a pretty important story, as it is bringing the Fourth Doctor's time as the Doctor to a close, and it is introducing 2 new characters who will play a big part in these things, those being Tremas and Nyssa. So, ultimately, what do I think of this story? I think it's pretty good. I mean, I don't know if it's the best, but I can definitely see why they did it. So, trying to reintroduce the Master and make a start on bringing Tom Baker's era to a close. So, should you check out Keeper of Traken? I'd say you won't lose anything by watching it, so I'd say yeah. Anyway, the next Doctor Who classic Doctor Who story I'm set to review, and the last one of this set for a little while, The Happiness Patrol. Once I watch that through, I'll let you know. Until then, see ya.